Hey, what's up, everyone? Yeah, there's a couple of things to talk about. There's always more to talk about with the Heart of the Jedi. Um, and I guess the most recent updates are that Kenneth Flint is going to be interviewed this Saturday on Echo Base Network YouTube channel. I don't know anything about them, but I've just seen that go around. So that'll be great. Looking forward to hearing from him about that. And yeah, it'll be great to learn a lot more about not just what he's been up to and maybe more insights from him about the story. But I can't wait for him to address how he feels about how this book has once again, been rediscovered by new elements of the fandom, and of course had great success on Amazon. So a funny thing about Heart of the Jedi is it seems like now that it's down from Amazon, it seems like it's now getting picked up by a lot of sort of like pop culture news blogs and sites and stuff like that. So it's finally really sort of picking up as a story sort of in the mainstream, at least in the mainstream sort of pop culture sort of press, right? And the only downside is that they're sort of picking up the sort of the story, sort of like the headline with a lot of these news sites now is not, wow, isn't it cool that there's like Lost EU, because there could be whole stories about the stuff that we still need to uncover. The story isn't so much about, wow, what a success. The story, naturally, because they're picking up on lots of other people who've run with the story, is why did Disney destroy EU fans by taking this down from Amazon? And what's funny about that is they're in a lot of cases, these blogs and stuff they're picking up on the story, they're really misunderstanding the nature of the Heart of the Jedi, right? I think in many cases they're sort of misrepresenting and leading lots of their readers to think that this is an old EU book that's always been in print from the old Bantam era that now Disney has sort of like uniquely and cruelly decided to remove forever from the market. No, right? Again, as we know, it's been available since 2015, thanks to the work. Hey, what's up, Quality? Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Again, we all know it's available. StarWarsTimeline.net always has been, always will be. It occasionally comes back into print thanks to the good offices of many people, uploading them over the years. I've got the files too. It can be done, right? There was a big blast in 2016. A couple of years ago, the files were sent around, and some people, I remember people on Twitter sort of sharing photos of their one-offs, right? This was the most recent, most interesting round, certainly the most accessible. What was really exciting about this most recent round with this Amazon upload is that thousands of people were able to get it, whereas before you were talking about maybe about 100. So it's really great that it's out there. And now, of course, it's on eBay and it's selling for hundreds of dollars and stuff like that. So anyway, there's a lot of really positive stories to tell about this. Unfortunately, the pop culture press seems to be picking up on the conspiracy theory laden sort of aspects of this, about everyone's speculation about why did Amazon pull it down. Hey, I'm glad you could join us live, and I'm glad you got, oh good, well, I'm glad that it seems like it's on its way. I've heard rumors that some people who bought it late were being contacted, and I can't confirm this, but we're being contacted by Amazon to say, well, this is no longer available, but we'll send you another Star Wars title in its place. I can't confirm that. If anyone's heard those rumors too, let me know. But the interesting thing about sort of the conspiracy side of this, about like, the speculation as to like why it got taken down, seems to me to be sort of almost superficially sort of easy to understand. It's a bootleg book, right? I mean, it was going to happen inevitably, which is why every video that I did, every post that we made, we were begging people to buy them now, because it's going to come down, right? And there's even some confusion about what is bootleg about it, right? Kenneth Flint owns the story. The rights revert back to him after all these years of inaction from Bantam, right? Who paid for the book. Lucasfilm and Bantam, commissioned the book. He writes it. It's ready to go. They shelf it. After some period of time of inaction, it effectively reverts back to him, the author, right? So he owns the story. So it's not like Lucasfilm or Disney or Del Rey is coming after the story, right? What's very likely the case is that they object to, understandably, the use of the Star Wars logo, which is a registered trademark, for better or worse, right, of the company who bought the IP from George Lucas in 2012. So it's pretty straightforward, right? And you'll notice that, this was commented on a few times, but if you tried to Google Star Wars Heart of the Jedi, you couldn't find it on Amazon. It was Heart of the Jedi, or the Heart of the Jedi, right? Now, unfortunately, though, the book cover with that beautiful art has a Star Wars logo. That's not something that that uploader or anyone can claim to legally sort of own or be able to use without permission, right? And so it was inevitable that was going to come down. But so that's the one unfortunate thing. I mean, again, let me be clear. I'm not super interested in who uploaded it. I'm not trying to do anything to get that person to reveal them themselves. But that's a slightly more interesting sort of who done it, right? Than who took it down. It's pretty obvious who took it down, right? You can't upload Star Wars books if you're not Lucasfilm. It's just that simple. Which again is why we were begging people to buy copies when you had a chance, and multiple copies too. It's again selling for hundreds of dollars on eBay. There's people who are pricing it at ridiculous amounts. I've seen someone be trying cute and sell it for $1,138 US, $1138, sort of like kind of a famous number in for Lucas, right? It's not going to sell at that high, right? But it's definitely been selling for hundreds of dollars, It would be very interesting if they went ahead and did that. And now the interesting thing about that is I think you'd get into there's an interesting legal question as to whether or not they could, because you'd get in an interesting fight, right? If Lucasfilm sort of hinted to Del Rey to exercise the rights to that old manuscript that Del Rey acquired when the Bantam license moved over back to Del Rey, they might say, great, let's dust that off. If we have it, right, we'll get ready to go. But, but it's not their book anymore. It's Kenneth Flint's again, right? So it's an interesting question. They'd have to buy it back from Kenneth Flint, which would be kind of funny. Hey, what's up, Michael? Thanks for joining. Yeah, that would be funny. And I don't want to publicly sort of endorse any sort of bootleg activity, lest I get into any legal trouble, but let's just say that would be a funny and a very good idea, and maybe a very productive one too. So who knows, maybe someone will make that happen. So anyway, it's still a great story. It's still a great story. And I hope that, some of the conspiracy theories can die down a little bit so that the pop culture press can really appreciate the real significance of this for Star Wars fandom, EU, the potential continuation of the EU, right? The one other bit of the story that I think is being slightly sort of misunderstood is the nature of the sales of it, right? So, Dylan at expanduniverse.com was reporting all week on the sales and how well it was doing, and with those screenshots of the Amazon bestseller charts and stuff, and how like there were different times when it was the best-selling Star Wars book on the market, right, at that particular moment in time. And the thing about that is there's a lot of nuance, and we all said that from the start. There's a lot of nuance there when that sort of news though then sort of gets broken down into a soundbite and run around the internet, it turns into, this is the best-selling book of all time. Objectively, I mean, I've seen people talk about how, this sold hundreds of thousands of copies of books. People sort of making the stuff up. It didn't sell that many. It sold many thousands, which for those particular points in time, those snapshots were enough for Amazon to say, yeah, it's outselling some of these books. The unfortunate thing is there are people who who like the EU and who love the Heart of the Jedi story and the saga and what it represents as sort of a success, but who also hate the new stuff so much that they can't help but say, isn't it great that this sold better than the High Republic stuff, which in their view, no one's buying, right? I don't know anything about the High Republic. I don't follow the new stuff. I do know this. The High Republic isn't the only thing that Lucasfilm continues to publish, right? So there's been this new thing that started now that it's sort of, now that the pop culture blogs are picking up the story at this point, right, after it's all done, where they say, Heart of the Jedi, this lost novel sold better than anything else they're doing, like the High Republic. Well, no, I mean, like the Timothy Zahn trilogy is completing, right? Like there are other things happening in the new canon, in all fairness, that are exciting to many of the new canon fans and a slightly even broader audience, right? So like, let's not be like too sort of crazy about this, right? It's like Heart of the Jedi sold unbelievably well. It's an amazing story. The new canon stuff sells well too. And that's what actually makes the Heart of the Jedi story all the more impressive, right? Not only is it objectively selling well, but it's selling as well and better than the new canon stuff too, right? So anyway, it's and I hope that that nuance can get picked up in some of the pop culture news blogs. I'm a little skeptical that it will, but the one other thing I have to say that I find so funny about some of the Heart of Jedi conversation is, again, there are people just becoming aware of the fact that like a week ago this was available on Amazon, right? And so they're sort of regretful, like, oh, I'm just finding out about this, right? And they're finding out about it because it's getting picked up as a news story now, right? Um, but I'm continuing to see people represent that, like, oh yeah, they read this book back in the day, and oh, isn't it neat? Oh, that's what a shame. Oh yeah, that old book. Oh, it's a shame that Disney's taken it away or whatever, right? I mean, I'm seeing people continue. I saw someone totally lie their ass off, and they said in the comments of one of these news posts, they were like, oh man, they go, that's crazy. It's selling for hundreds of dollars on eBay. They go, man, I got my copy from from the thrift store years ago. You know, it was just sitting there collecting dust. You did not buy this from a thrift store years ago, right? Unless in some insane coincidence you happen to pick up one of the 100 copies that were printed in 2016. You know, but anyway, what are you going to do? It's still a great story, and it's fun to sort of watch some of the saga continue to unfold. Well, that's the question. That's the big question, Altron. And I when I I'll put it this way: when this Heart of the Jedi, when this most recent saga unfolded, this newest upload at Amazon, I really thought of it as a test run for those Hungarian novels, right? The Han Solo Hungarian novels that are being translated, and a lot of stuff that we have that was canceled or never had the chance to be released. So yeah, it was interesting to see how well I think, and I think as far as that test goes, I think it was a success, right? I mean, I think two things. One, turns out that something can be on Amazon for a lot longer than I think a lot of us thought. I thought it would be gone immediately, right? But like a lot of it, thousands of people had a chance to get in on it. And it also seems to have sort of like awakened a sort of a hunger, right, in the broader Star Wars fandom for just these old stories, right? And so that's really great. But yeah, it could be as simple as leave off the stuff that an uploader legitimately doesn't own, and then maybe there's not so much of an issue, right? Yeah, I mean, well said. It's almost like you could publish books from both continuities and they both sell. That's exactly right. And I think that's really the headline. I think that's the headline. Yeah. Michael, I don't know. I don't know because I haven't looked into that. It's a really good question. It's a really good question. It's a good question for Joe Bongiorno. I wish I knew the answer to that. I have to be honest. I actually haven't read the translated versions yet. Just haven't made the time. And I've said this before too. There's something there. It's like years ago. This is like a weird analogy. Like years ago, I bought this DVD for this like movie. It was like the third in like a trilogy. I still haven't watched it. It's still sealed. The Blu-ray. I'm afraid to watch it because like I know I'm gonna love it. I love this franchise so much. I'm kind of like I'm like savoring the moment, right? It's like a nice bottle of wine, right? And I'm waiting for the right moment. And I feel a little bit like that with these. It's like it's been 7 years since the discontinuation of the EU, and to the extent that these Hungarian solo novels like broadly fit with, or at least were, roughly intended to fit within them, to the extent that they're sort of quasi-canonical within the EU continuity. I'm like, I've already gone 7 years. I can go a little bit longer. I want to like just really. I don't want to like blow my wad on these 4 books, right? And then have nothing left, right? You know what I mean? So when I do, and I'll get to them sooner than later, but I'd love to talk a lot more about them. I mean, again, that's another amazing story that I wish more of the pop culture press was picking up on, right? Which is that like all these many years in, look at what it's doing. I mean, the creativity of the fandom to go and like track these things down. And then after all these years and all of these false starts, actually get them translated from Hungarian. No easy task, man. It's a really great success story. Absolutely, Josh. Well said. Completely agree. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I always joke about this, but like with like the Twin Sons Foundation, who does things like put up billboards or other. There's been other efforts over the years to sort of try and publicly sort of promote the legends, continue the legends cause. It's amazing how often we've had to spend money in order to prove that we'll eventually spend more money on things, right? But this was a chance to spend money on something real, and that felt great. And I think a lot of people felt that way. Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing, Lance? Thanks for showing up. Good to see you. Yeah. Yeah, it's neat. I can sort of sense like even some like big names in sort of like the community have maybe or only more recently sort of like finally like wrapped up reading like Fate of the Jedi, and I imagine probably for the same reasons. It's just like yeah, it's like you can kind of go on the slow burn now. It's fun, like take your time because when it's hopefully, but here's the thing, hopefully, let's be hopeful. Um, when we've all read everything, right, then hopefully by that point there'll be new stuff to read. And I know that's the goal, right? But like in the meantime, we can kind of space it out. Yeah, they're not here yet. Everything's been so slow with all like the way the COVID sort of production supply lines, it just sort of like, completely come to a halt. So don't have them yet. Don't have them yet. The thing that and for anyone who doesn't know, there are these German YA books that seem in some places to maybe go a little sort of outside of continuity. I think they're from the late 90s. I was fascinated by it. Quality here sort of I forget where I even heard you talk about this. It was a while ago, and I did some looking into them, and then a while ago I found English language books that seem to have some similar covers, and so I ordered them, but they're all from the UK, so they're taking a while to get in. So I will get you guys an update on that when they come. Hopefully, they come sooner than later. I'm glad you like it. I really haven't heard anyone dislike it, which has been really great. I'm excited I'm excited that people are enjoying it. I I've made no secret. I mean, the Bantam era is my favorite. And Hey, Alex, good to see you. The Bantam era is my favorite for a variety of reasons. Some nostalgic, I don't think everything in that era is good, but there's just something special and something unique about that era, and I think the book fits into it very well. It would have been a very good Bantam era book, right? It would have fit very well in that period, and I'm glad people seem to be enjoying it. I know I'm sure Kenneth Flint must be thrilled about that too. So I'm really excited to see him on Saturday when he's interviewed to sort of see his thoughts about how the fandom's sort of been enjoying the story. Good. So as more Heart of the Jedi updates come, I will talk about them. It's been fun to see. Again, it's what a story, what an amazing story. And I actually had a dream at some bookstore. I couldn't believe it. Oh boy, was I sad to wake up. I couldn't believe it. Um, yep. Yeah, there's a lot more about it's funny coming as it did, sort of as one of like what would have been one of the only sort of like major contributions to lore outside of like gaming and comics and stuff. Like since the films, it's interesting and that it's neat to get a glimpse into what the authors of the time were thinking about, what we the readers would want to know more about. So yeah. Yep. I mean, hard to go wrong, right? NJO is pretty good too. And it's funny in the fandom, there's definitely this interesting divide, and it was fairly pointed back in the day, especially, right? I mean, the Bantam and the NJO era, they feel very different in lots of different ways. But as Matt Wilkins is so eloquently put it, it really feels like as we the fans were sort of going from Bantam to NJO, getting older, right? Getting more mature, Star Wars storytelling from Bantam NJO was sort of like maturing along that same track, right? And so we go from some fairly inconsequential stories. By that I mean, it's like, look, the twins are getting kidnapped again. They're going to be safe again, right? To NJO, and spoiler alert, lots of bad things start happening, right? So. Hmm. Yeah. Well, cool. Good. There definitely was a perceived shift, and I think really a lot of it had to do with more of like the fandom, uncertain about the fact that this was now Del Rey doing NJO as opposed to Bantam. I think that's what I think a lot of the fans were bringing into it at the time. I'm glad to hear that you didn't really perceive a shift though, and certainly, yeah, I don't think it's that dissonant either in reality. Yeah, um, this is one of the alternate realities that really sort of you know I obsess over. I mean, what things would have been like if we'd gotten these now. Um, Legacy of Doom. I think it's just gone for good. Who knows? Who knows if we'll ever get Exiles of the Force? It's you never know what scraps may still be available somewhere in someone's files, So, but never give up hope. But that would have been great, without a doubt. I think, and in Legacy of Doom in particular, because we're talking about Margaret Weiss, an author who is so important to another type of fantasy writing. It's just interesting to sort of see when you look back on the types of choices that Bantam and Del Rey made in terms of the authors they brought on. I think it would have been interesting to sort of see what sort of template she would have, effectively established for future fantasy authors to enter the, the EU sort of writing scheme, and you sort of see it a little bit, Harvey Salvatore and definitely some others, Terry Brooks, interestingly, right? I mean, that's a big name from this fantasy world to come into the EU. Wish we would have gotten more from a lot of those folks, Oh, yeah, it's interesting. It's a good question. I take it to sort of mean like the slightly sort of darker, like is this the combination of like Luke either turning or Luke sort of like walking away and walking off into the sunset? I'm intrigued by it definitely. I have to say though that I feel like maybe it's just sort of sappy, but I sort of think that if you just take the 6 films, there is a certain, however narratively satisfying, I think a lot of Gary Kurtz's ideas are, and very literary and logical. And after those 6 films, there is something very satisfying, however sappy, about everyone sort of just getting a break for once, right? The entire galaxy's been thrown into totalitarianism and then civil war and rebellion and uncertainty and death and misery, and there's a spark of hope, right? And at the end of the day, the Republic is restored and Anakin is redeemed, and Luke, unlike his father, is actually able to make the right decisions, at these important junctures. And so it's like, a happy ending, at least in the context of the films, works for me, even though I'm completely intrigued by what would have happened if it had gone a different direction. It would have been just as narratively, I think, sort of satisfying. Mm-hmm. Those old Dark Horse forums, man, there's so much that's lost, and I feel like I feel like over the last couple of years, like I've been saying things that I now worry about in retrospect. Like people just must assume I'm lying, because I always say things like, "Look, like Leland Shee promised that he would eventually produce, or that Lucasfilm would produce an updated timeline to actually make sense of the Filoni Clone Wars, right? And to actually sort of, like, and I'm starting to say that now, and people I think start to think I'm just making that up. No, he did, things like that. And a lot of that you found on those forums, and a lot of those are just gone. So it's real harder and harder to find the original sources to point to, which is really a shame. Totally. Yep. Yeah, it's a good question. So, yeah, a couple years ago, I did a video that was sort of surprisingly controversial, basically making this sort of structural argument, this observation, not about the substance per se of the new canon, which again, I don't really follow. So I've always said I'm not in a position to critique. And it's why I don't really join into this chorus of online, the sort of the tribal debates about how bad the new stuff is. I don't know enough about it to sort of say either way. All I do know is everything that I've heard from Lucasfilm about why they got rid of the EU and what they wanted to do structurally with the new canon. And what they wanted to do was what did they say from the start? Well, they wanted to make everything on the same tier of canon. They wanted to have a coherent, And you'd hear this stuff, and you're kind of like, this doesn't sound entirely different from what we got in the EU in terms of consistent continuity and stuff like that. But it was all about how this was it. There was going to be the plan, the story group was going to flow from that, and you started to see immediately how you didn't even have to see what was happening in reality with the new canon. You just logically, right. What that implied was that everything was going to have to be planned out between now and the next time they reboot Star Wars, right? And it just didn't make sense. And so what I meant by the new canon being fragile is that if they were to accidentally introduce a contradiction, or if some author had some new interesting way of shining some new light on some old story, you couldn't just call it a retcon in the way that the EU could sort of find ways of around, right? No, it was all of a sudden it was sort of broken because you were being told by the creators, right, that everything was on the same tier. And so all of a sudden it really made almost a mockery of the idea of what canon is, at least with respect to continuity, because there had really become this point with the EU where canon and continuity had kind of become synonymous, but they're not entirely the same things, right? What you sort of realize with the new canon is that, sure, lots of different things can be part of the canon, but it's kind of a jumble, right? It doesn't make sense. They don't add up, right? And so it turns out that what I always thought was so funny about in 2014, Lucasfilm telling us about how, well, the new stuff's all going to be canon. It was them misunderstanding what EU fans liked about the EU. I never cared that it was canon. It didn't really matter to me. What mattered is that you could continue to pick up book after story after RPG, and it all started lined up, right? It was the continuity that mattered the most. Anyway, so the new canon is just structurally fragile. It just doesn't, because of the way they've talked about it, all being the same tier, it just doesn't allow them to do really anything interesting. You can't introduce new things and not break the system. So it's fragile in that way. The EU, on the other hand, is anti-fragile. What do I mean by that? If something appears to break, it actually makes the whole stronger, because it's like, famous example, George Lucas kind of tampers with Boba Fett's origin stories in Attack of the Clones. The EU doesn't just break. It doesn't just say, well, we've got this slightly contradictory story here and contradictory stories over here. Instead, they find ways of making it all make more sense over time, right? With, where the retcons don't just feel like, oh, here's a mistake that we need to make sense of. No, it's shining new light on something we thought we knew, but now we know more about, right? And so it was controversial because people thought I was just dumping on the new stuff and referring to fans or the stories as fragile. And I just mean this in a purely sort of like social scientific sort of structural sort of way. It's just the way that they talked about the new canon, those cracks and even the unintentional cracks and contradictions and stuff are going to just sort of like devalue and break the system over time. So what do I think about it? I think it's predictable, and I think it's unfortunate. It was avoidable, and I guess I'd say this. It's like if anyone reading the new stuff who's watching this is bothered by the cracks and contradictions and actually prefers continuity over this vaulted idea of canon, come on over to the EU where it all sort of adds up. So good question. Yep, that'd be great. Yeah, no, I agree. It'd be neat to see more. I think someone mentioned it'd be a cool what if. That would be an interesting comic story they could do or something. Yeah. I mean, and I think that it's funny, the tier system within the EU is like it wasn't always that way. There've been different eras. Prior to 2014, there were a lot of different ways in which Lucasfilm themselves, as guardians of all the licensees sort of content, they had different ways of thinking about it. I mean, there was a time when the EU was thought of, like prior to 2000, like a little more in a little slightly more clunky fashion. There was literally a time when there was a list at Lucasfilm of these are the things that are sort of canon, these are things not. And if something did contradict, they kind of had to put it in the not canon list. And this is why there's a lot of baggage about like, the Jedi print series and stuff. Well, there's some contradictions. So it was just on the not canon list. What was so helpful about the tier system is that it didn't solve everything. And I think in some ways it created some new problems, which I've talked about in other videos, but as a way of as a way of making continuity possible, it really seemed to work really well, right? So it turns out like a tier system is like, I think particularly for something that lasts 37 years is like kind of necessary. And it feels like the new canon seems to be sort of just in practice getting back to that point and where I think it needs to be. But it's a shame because again, they told everyone for the last 7 years that, pick it all up because it's all going to add up, and you can sort of see implicitly that's not necessarily the case. So it's unfortunate. I think that, and I hope this is clear. None of this is meant to denigrate any of the new stuff if there's fans of it or whatever. But it just didn't have to be that way, and it's unfortunate that I think they set it up that way slightly to fail structurally, right? So. Yeah, great. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, the Essential Legends collection. So there was an update that at least I saw yesterday um, about some of the new stuff. So the first wave, and by the way, what is this? It's basically Del Rey, I think partially in conjunction with like it's one of these like 50th anniversary of Lucasfilm sort of celebration things they want to sort of like, it's partly related to that sort of as a tie-in. But Del Rey is going to republish what they deem to be sort of the Essential Legends books, right? And it's really the first time you're going to see a lot of old EU books in the new trade paperback size rather than the old mass market size. And I've said in other videos, this is potentially the beginning of the end of mass market for the EU. So get those smaller books while you can. The potential danger, though, is that the book industry in general is moving towards those larger sizes. And because Del Rey is doing that under the Essential Legends banner, there's likely going, and I'm not trying to scare anyone or start any conspiracy theories, but I just think that over time, what this probably means is that we're going to see some older EU books probably fall out of print for a while because let's just be blunt, like Ruins of Dantooine is never going to get the Essential Legends treatment, right? It's just not a book that rises to that level in either Del Rey or the fandom's mind, right? And so as that mass market version with the Legends banner goes out of print from time to time, which it will, I just don't know if they're going to be rushing back to put it in this new trade paperback size, which is more expensive and costs more and stuff like that. So it's weird. It's right. In the meantime, though, here's what I think. Wave one was fairly predictable. There were 3 books, I think. It was Heir to the Empire, makes sense. It was Path of Destruction, so the first in sort of the Karpyshyn Old Republic trilogy, and then Shatterpoint. Shatterpoint was weird to me because I like that book. I don't know if it's a huge fan favorite. I just have my finger on the pulse of the Shatterpoint, niche of the fandom. But it was a little weird of all the things, and I think it was particularly weird because obviously you got to do the Thrawn trilogy again. They're gonna keep republishing that till the cows come home. The Old Republic makes sense because the Old Republic it's still hot. It's still happening. There's constantly rumors that there's going to be some Old Republic thing in the new canon. It's an easy, obvious tie-in there, right? It's going to get a lot of people potentially interested in it, right? Shatterpoint's weird, and I have to conclude, just being cynical about the marketing of it, right? That it's like, are they planning to put like Mace Windu in like some Disney Plus stories or something, right? Why, of all the Clone Wars books, that one? And it could be that a lot of the Clone Wars books are so obviously sort of like contradictory, sort of in spirit to the Filoni Clone Wars, that maybe they don't want to go with a lot of the other ones, right? But what is it about? Is it just that they think Samuel Jackson's face on the cover of a book sells? I mean, I'm really, really curious. I mean, I'm glad and I hope more people discover it. But I think the weirdest thing about all these is that they're not including anything new for folks who already have them. Like I'm just not going to rush out and buy these things. But the unabridged audiobook of Shatterpoint is going to be great. And is it true that they're doing an unabridged of Rogue Squadron? I've heard that rumor too. I haven't seen that confirmed, but if that's true, that's great. The second wave was announced, and it's going to be, no surprise, it's going to be Dark Force Rising, so they're continuing the Zahn. It's going to be Rule of Two, so they're continuing the Karpyshyn trilogy. It's going to be, I think I heard Plagueis too, which makes sense. And then Rogue Squadron, so just the first book of the 10, 11, volume Squadron series. And again, it's like, yes, I would consider many of those stories to be part of an Essential Legends collection. But again, the cynical, marketing person in me just says they're doing that because there's going to be a movie called Rogue Squadron coming out, right? That is part of the new canon. So it's like, it's just an easy kind of like thing that they might actually, it might just convince just enough people or confuse just enough people in the new canon side to go pick it up thinking it's going to be, inspiring the new film or whatever, right? So, and it got me thinking like what aren't we going to see in the Legends collection versus things that are potentially sort of likely, just, being realistic about the marketing. And I jotted down a quick list. I'm thinking, I think when you think about what are they going to put beyond these obvious trilogies, right? And I think doing Last Command too. I think they're going to Wave 2 is going to have Last Command, so they're going to finish up the Thrawn trilogy. But a Wave 3 is probably going to like maybe finish the Corporation trilogy. But what else could you see there? Given that there's going to be this Kenobi TV show, I'd be shocked if they don't put Kenobi, the Jackson Miller book, in there, and maybe like one of the Maul books. I don't know, because Maul's still a popular character. They brought him back for the Solo film, and I think if they ever do a Solo 2, I wouldn't be surprised if they put out under this essential Legends banner, like the Lando trilogy and one of the Han Solo trilogies, right? So I mean that just makes sense, right? I actually even thought something they could do, because even though it's sort of weird and kind of one-off-ish and doesn't relate to the new canon, it precisely because it doesn't overlap, it might make sense, and it would be Splinter of the Mind's Eye. You could imagine like Dave Filoni pushing for this, right? Because he always talks about, part of his self-proclaimed EU credentials, right, involve him loving that cover, right? So I could see that, but it's sad. I mean, I guess I was shocked too with like the Mandalorian. I'm surprised that Bounty Hunter Wars doesn't seem to be a bigger topic. I don't know that they're connected. It's just that like, you imagine how easy it would be to sell, Mandalorian sort of perceived Mandalorian tie-in stuff, right, from the Bounty Hunters War. So we'll sort of see what eventually comes down the pike. I was thinking too really quickly, like what is an essential Legends collection? And if you were just being objective about it, not sort of marketing based, I think you'd probably have to say the Zahn stuff. I think you would want to republish all the Bantam Tales books, probably the Jedi Academy. I definitely think Rogue Squadron, some of those books, and then probably Truce at Baccarat and Shadows of the Empire. And Shadows is something that could potentially get a essential Legends treatment too. Well, maybe. I suspect that Truce at Baccarat is just too overlapping with the Wendig stuff, that they might not want to go that way, at least anytime soon. And I think on the Del Rey side, definitely the old Han and Lando trilogies, definitely some of the Old Republic books. And then I think what is part of an essential Legends collection, I think some pieces from NJO and Legacy of the Force. And I feel like Fate of the Jedi is just still too new, to be honest, but yeah, we'll see what eventually comes. We'll see what comes down the pike. I don't know though. I miss a bunch of. Yeah, I don't want to knock on Filoni too much, but yeah, the way he's talked about like Lucas was, right, and I think that's what's sad. I mean, I think anyone being perceived as like the new savior over Lucas, it just makes me sad. I mean, people talk about Favreau that way too, and it's also just kind of like, it just feels wrong, I think there's been a lot of contradictions. I mean, I know like pretty early on, there was some really superficially silly ones and stuff. And sometimes like little basic contradictions don't bother me, but it's like, there's things that just increasingly feel like, I mean, the fact that like the story group had basically admitted that they had no real sort of like say over the films themselves seems to me to be like the first like major sign of catastrophe for this new system, right? So it's just unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. Mm-hmm. Jedi Prince is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And by the way, Jedi Prince we're talking a lot this week about like what are other canceled or things that never got a chance to be printed, EU stories and stuff like that. Jedi Prince is another case where there was going to be another trilogy, and we know from the authors where they wanted to go with it, right? And so that would be another cool thing to eventually see. Let's get the remainder of that story for sure. Let me tell you something. That would be a hell of an achievement. If that happens, I think the EU is probably on the verge of them coming back immediately if they think that that's going to sell. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah. Taking a break for Heart of the Jedi. That's good. I like that. That's too bad. Yeah, that's too bad. sad. Really good question. Really good question. And probably from a cynical marketing perspective, I'm sure the people producing that stuff don't care, right? And we're probably hoping that a large number of people were thinking that's what it was going to be, for sure. That's a good question. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate the way that's potentially sort of affecting it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that whole story. I'm watching that story. I'm seeing where it goes. The whole question of the rights. I mean, there've been a lot of different royalty regimes over the years, from my understanding, that like there was a time when royalties were more of a thing with EU books, and then there was a time when, in some cases, you got the flat fee. There was a different sort of structure, and it may explain why there's like fewer authors coming out in sort of support, although quite a few have. But I mean, I think different people, I think every author in the EU kind of had like a different deal. It sort of sounds like increasingly, Michael Stackpole actually has written a little bit about this. He had a really interesting post years ago now, but it's still available on his site, about why he left the EU effectively. And he was addressing a rumor of whether it had anything to do with royalties or whatever. And he was sort of explaining how I don't think in his case he got royalties, or at least maybe for some books he didn't, some he didn't. So it's extremely confusing. I am not a copyright or IP lawyer. So I guess the thing that confuses me the most is I don't know how it works after all these years when entities are bought by other entities. So it's like, to what sorts of obligations does Disney, say, have as the owner of Lucasfilm, the licensee or the licensor of stories and stuff through Bantam and Del Rey, like these deals that Bantam and Del Rey made all these decades ago. Like, who's ultimately responsible for that? Like, is now Disney is like I don't know. I know I'm evincing some stupidity on this, but again, I don't know enough about it to know. So I'm keeping an eye on the story for sure. Well, it's a good question, and I hope it leads to more new books. Yeah, I don't know, but we'll see, right? I mean, right now, based on what they're deciding to reprint, it's an interesting window into which bits of the EU seem to still be selling, right? So they must be fairly confident that like there's going to be like a new audience for Heir to the Empire and Dark Force Rising: Last Command, because they've now reprinted those so many times at this point, right? I mean, Heir to the Empire, just before the decanonization, got the 20th anniversary hardcover treatment. It got an unabridged audio version. When the decanonization occurred, it got an updated edition with the Legends banner. Less than a year later, it got the whole trilogy got republished with new cover art and Legends banner. And now it's like, it's amazing to me. It's like, this is another weird analogy. It's like Guns N' Roses' first record, Appetite for Destruction, like still sells like a crazy number of records every year. Like it just keeps selling like millions and millions of records. And it's like, who at this point who's into rock and roll doesn't have that record? And yet it turns out that like evidently tons of people, or maybe people are losing their CDs and stuff like that. But it's like, there's evidently just this like apparently limitless demand for the Thrawn trilogy. But anyway, I think this initial wave of what they're republishing, I think, speaks more to sort of their sense of the highest expected value on some books that they just know sell really well. And so it's really going to be hard to say. I think if future waves sell really well, I think it'd be a better, success indicator, right, of some potential new legends to come. Right now, it just seems like they're just kind of, and I don't mean this to sound cynical, but they're just kind of cashing in on the stuff they know is gonna sell. Which, by the way, I think is interesting. That Shatterpoint was part of their first wave, so go figure. It turns out maybe that's still selling really well, and good for Shatterpoint and good for Matthew Stover. Speaking of Matthew Stover, what's so sad is that given the complexity around the novelizations, sort of be novelizations of the canon films, but themselves being works of the EU, right? All the novelizations are legends now, right? It's sad that you'll probably never get those as part of this essential legends treatment, right? So to the extent that it's even possibly true that over time, the existence of these essential legends books might mean some of the older mass markets go out of print for a time. It's sad to think that the novelizations could see that treatment too, because people need to be reading the Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith, and even Attack of the Clones. But Revenge of the Sith, in particular, Matthew Stover's book, is definitely one of the EU highlights, and it deserves what what we would think of as an essential legend sort of treatment, right? But I don't think it's going to get that, just given the complexity of the nature of the novelizations. This is another great one. I'm sure quite a few, and of course, there's a classic old Marvel, the original Marvel comics run. One of the issues is, on the cover it says "The Last Jedi," so we've seen this all over the place, and I'm sure quite a few people have picked this up. In fact, I remember at one of the Star Wars celebrations after the decanonization, I remember seeing that old Last Jedi Marvel comics cover like everywhere, because again, a lot of the vendors were just trying to kind of cash in. I saw it on T-shirts, postcards, and you can imagine a lot of fans picking that up, yep, like, great. Is this related to the movie or whatever? Anyway, that would be great. That would be a lot of fun too. It would be fun. You know what? If there's going to be an Essential Legends, let's create like an unessential Legends collection, right? And it's going to be Ruins of Dantooine and Crystal Star, and you don't even have to base it on like you like the book, but like it's sad to say that there are some books that just don't get discussed anymore, right? So it's going to be like, Shadows of Mindor would be there. New Rebellion. I mean, sadly, as strong as the Bantam era is, there are some books that are just strangely neglected, right? But what else would you put in that? Anyway, that's funny. I wonder though if like Revan or something would get the Essential Legends treatment, just to the extent that it would be an obvious, marketing tie-in with just this increasing sort of interest in the broader fandom for more Old Republic stuff. Yeah, and I'm good. Pick it up, and I hope it sells well. I have to say, personally, I probably won't. I'll probably get the unabridged version of Shatterpoint, which is cool, because that's something new, right? That we haven't had before. But I'm weird because pre-2014, I basically had a standing order for anything EU. I was just didn't think about it. The only thing I ever was sort of slightly slow to get to would be like Old Republic stuff, which again is ironic because now if anything Old Republic comes out, like I'm on it day of, right? But post 2014, so there's this like there's something about my my collecting mentality of the EU, which is that like I want everything pre-2014. I want my entire sort of like collection of Star Wars things to remind me about what it was like pre-2014. It's also why I collect the promo posters and the bookstore displays and stuff, because I want to remember sort of every aspect of what it was like back then. To open up a magazine and see something Star Wars related and not have to think, oh, is this canon legends, is it this, that, the other? It was just all part of this immersive sort of fan experience. So anything EU pre-2014 I picked up. And obviously anything relevant, anything new post 2014, I picked up too, right? So kept up with Fantasy Flight for a little while until it sort of became, fairly sort of like obviously just new canon stuff. Obviously Marvel 108, I got all 7 variant covers. I got the trade paperback that came out later. Forever Crimson, I got several promo items related to it, magazine advertisements, right? I went nuts on that, right? There's one Epic collection too, that if you had everything pre-2014 you need to get, because there's something that is new, it's collected there for the first time, an old it's the first volume of the old Star Wars newsprint comics. You need to pick that up. So that and Marvel 108 are the only things I have that I needed that have a Legends banner. I actually did a few years back go out on the day they came out, buy the newly reissued books of the Zahn trilogy with the new cover, just to sort of show my love for the new stuff. But I sort of slowed that down. I haven't really been buying the Epics collections, and partly it's like I want to like save that money. I'm not boycotting, but it's like I want to save that money for new Legends, right? And the other thing too is, quite honestly, some of this stuff, it's getting harder. Even the new stuff, the Epic collections, like some of them are like out of print, they're harder to find. And to be totally honest, it's like I don't need these things that are just purely duplicates, right? Just taking up space in my shelf when they could be enjoyed by some other EU fan. So I hope this stuff sells well, but I don't rush out and get it. I'm actually increasingly inclined to get the Titan short story collection, even though I don't need it. I have all those short stories in the original, but I've seen it and it looks beautiful. It's like hardcover, which I didn't realize. It just looks nice. I don't know. It's just another neat way of accessing some of those old stories. So I've been a bit more choosy about some of the new stuff. And again, with these essential legends, I'll see how they look. If they're really attractive, I might pick them up. I'm definitely going to get the unabridged Shatterpoint. I don't know if they're going to do annotated versions, but of Dark Force and Last Command, like they did with Heir to the Empire. But that would be fantastic. I'm trying to remember if I heard any rumors back in the day about them doing that. I don't know, but it would be cool. It'd be a neat thing to do. I mean, it's particularly important with Heir to the Empire because there's just some things about like what we thought of about clones and stuff at the time that obviously like, you know, our understanding became updated, right? So that was an important book to have. Those annotations like really matter to help the look. They provide a lot of historical context, right? But the interesting thing about the hardcover re-release with annotations of Heir to the Empire back in the day, whenever that was that came, I guess would have been 2011-ish, right? It was the anniversary of that book that allowed Del Rey to sort of like kind of repackage it in that way. And that's why like when Marvel 108 came out, it was because it was the, whatever it was the 80th anniversary of Marvel, right? This Essential Legends collection is in theory, I think, being done under the guise of, hey, Lucasfilm's been around for 50 years. Let's do some things to celebrate that. So I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind. I think I think the licensees are looking for these like natural sort of anniversary points to sort of go back to Lucasfilm to say, can we do something new? And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some Del Rey anniversary or something that comes up that affords them the opportunity to maybe get a short story greenlit or something like that. But yeah, yeah, multiple times, absolutely. And I'd heard this rumor for years too, that BioWare was actually, based on the nature of their license, actually able to commission stories themselves. You know, if you look at any of those old Republic books, you know, they're effectively like co-published almost in some sense, right? But they never exercise that right, and it's a shame. It's a shame. I mean, so I don't want to start a new false rumor, but I remember hearing that back in the day that BioWare had the power to commission stories themselves. It's too bad we never got more from him on that. I've said multiple times now, though, that I'd be super happy with just knowing where the authors wanted to go. I don't even necessarily need the story, right? If I had the outline or a sense or a blog post from them about where they wanted to go, boy, that would be great. It would effectively feel like new Legends, right? Because why did I keep reading Star Wars, right? It's like I wanted to know where the story kept going, right? And so, and that's what was so cruel about decanonization. It's like, sure, there's other things now called Star Wars, and there's adventures and stuff. And people continue to tell me, "Oh, the Mandalorian's fun," and for folks who love it, I'm glad. But it doesn't provide any additional light for me on where these characters that I knew were going next, right? You know. So again, if all we did was got some nonfiction updates from Drew Carverson about where he wanted to go, that'd be super, super awesome. Good choices. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, and speaking of Clone Wars too, I feel like just given all the complexities of the nature of that timeline and the rift between Travis and Filoni and stuff, you're not going to see anything. You're really not going to see anything more from the Clone Wars probably as part of Essential Legends collection. Yeah, I should say it's funny. I kind of keep knocking that one as an example, but I'm when it comes to the EU, I'm incredibly easily entertained, and I don't mind that book. I'm very nostalgic for the book based on who gave it to me and stuff. So I actually have a special little place in my heart for that little book, the little book that could. Although I've always said it, of all the books that they could have written that adapt, video games. It's like, why that one? There's so many others that you could do too, and that would be a fun topic to think about. What other types of games, deserved stories and novelizations. It's awesome. That's great. Good. It's good stuff for sure. He is. Quality is from Germany, and he will use his knowledge of the German language to play pranks on the EU fandom, like he did when he convinced some of us that there was a German language book by Hambly and Rebecca Moesta. It's funny, Quality, if you're still watching, it was really funny because Dylan had sent us this snapshot of it, and we were looking at it, right? And I wanted to believe it so badly and stuff. And we started doing some research. You remember on the live stream, looking at the ISBN and stuff. I'm like, this doesn't really add up. I went back the next day and I looked at, I Googled it. And I found the larger page. Now, my German isn't very good, but there was something on a larger version of the thing that we had. Like Dylan just had this little snapshot of it, right? Right below that snapshot was something that I could pretty easily sort of like translate as something about like April Fool's book or something. So if only I'd seen it on that stream, could have ended 15 minutes of us just so desperately hoping that there was actually this lost story about Mortis from Hambly. But anyway, very, very, very well played. Quality. That was really funny. Oh, it's good to know they got a re-release. Oh, that's really great. There's definitely some good Star Wars variants sort of that are published for the German market. There have been over the years. That's great. How do I feel about it? I've got a lot of thoughts about this because I feel horrible about it, and I feel exactly the way I feel when the EU ended in 2014. I had every Star Trek book ever written up until basically this past year, when the all of the sort of the lines of continuity that were starting to sort of finally interweave again after about a good 10 years sort of concerted effort sort of came to an end, largely as a result of the Picard TV show. It's so unfortunate, and it's the same thing happening to Star Trek that happened to Star Wars, right? Where it's just increasingly all of the fans who have kept the franchise going in between the dark years of different movies and TV shows and stuff, they've been keeping it going through the books and things like that, right? They get totally just sort of ignored when it's like someone else, some production company, in this case Bad Robot, comes along and says we want to make some new films and some new TV shows, because isn't that where Star Wars is going now too? Everything's on Disney Plus, and it's not about serving those of us who want to sort of like really understand where these obscure characters are going, right? That we've been invested in over these decades. Instead, no, it's about sort of putting on a couple of hours of some flashy sort of shows and stuff, and then doing some media tie-ins about that, right? Which they're happy with, and which are going to sell and sort of like sizzle and get some signups and subscribers and stuff, so that they're happy for their boy. But they totally piss on all of us, right? Who've been following this stuff for years. So it's how do I feel about it? I feel really bad, and it's definitely a trigger point because I think also in the same way that Crucible, for instance, is not necessarily the ending that Troy Denning would have written had he known it. It was basically the last book in the EU. The last Next Generation book, for instance, that came out in late 2019, Collateral Damage. It's a really good book. Not the book you would have written, though, to be the end. Just so I'm clear what we're talking about, in case anyone's not aware, Star Trek, unlike Star Wars, has never had this like super tight sort of regard for the books and the shows sort of matching up. That said, they haven't always gone out of their way to be contradictory. And what's more, why can't I'm drawing a blank. Whatever the last Star Trek movie was back in like 2002, I don't know why I can't remember that. After that, they sort of rebooted the novel line, and with the exception of the original series novels, Next Generation and Enterprise and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, they all sort of tie it in addition to a bunch of novel series that were effectively like new EU to the Star Trek universe, right? So a book about Riker And God, I'm really drawing a blank here. Why can't I think of it? What was it called? Titan, of course. Titan and Klingon, and there was even some like there was even some Star Trek stories originally published just in Germany that then got English translations. Why I'm drawing such a blank here? I've been such a Star Wars world the last year or so since I've basically stopped following track. But all of these things were starting to tell these connected stories, and there are some amazing stories. I mean, I'd really highly recommend if anyone's interested in Star Trek, go check out David Mack's. I'm so embarrassed. I have to look this up because I can't. I'm like drawing a total blank. Um, Destiny. That's what it is. So Destiny is this great trilogy that it's about the Borg. Without giving anything away, it like ties like the old Enterprise TV show with Scott Bakula and stuff into all these things happening in the future related to the Borg. It brings a lot of resolution to the Borg's saga and stuff. It's fantastic. The really exciting thing is that I've heard recently is that David Mack is supposedly working on either a book or a trilogy subtitled Coda that is supposed to do something to continue the old continuity, or maybe it's going to end it finally, but like in a satisfying way. And so I'm a little happy about that. I remember him. I was in some like Star Trek groups that I left because I was just so mad about this with all of the authors, and they had a really weird view. They would always say things like, "Well, look, what happens happens if the new shows don't want to follow the book's continuity. That's that. It's not like Star Wars. That's what they'd say. It's not like Star Wars." But the thing was, you don't have to be a formula like Star Wars to like give a shit about it, right? And what was so great is like where the authors really wanted to do the work of connecting these together, they could, right? And they were doing it. And they were doing it for like 10 years. There really was a golden era that ended 2016, maybe, where I mean, just constant new books all connected. It was a really, really great time, and it felt a little bit like, and post 2014, it was a really great time too. Things were really ramping up. There was an amazing run of Next Generation novels. You learn a lot more about. I'll give some very light spoilers here. You learn a lot more about like the fate of Data, for instance. You learn more about like Worf sort of like assuming greater responsibility. I mean, what was so clear about where the books were going is that Worf was really being set up for something big, and I think that like it would be really great to see Worf actually like take command of the Enterprise or something. It'd be great to see Captain Worf, and I feel like that's an opportunity that we just have like completely lost, and it's just a shame. So I love the Star Trek litverse. And I'm cautiously hopeful that David Mack can actually sort of, if not bring some closure, like at least to give a little bit of a nod to those of us who sort of just completely ignored after like 40 years. So it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. I've actually done. I think I did a video about this a while ago. If you want to check it out, but it's a bummer. Sorry, I'm like way off the rails now. But I could talk about Star Trek all day, and I could talk about the ham-fisted way in which, not just like with the EU getting decanonized, they sort of just decided, well, there's a new Picard TV show, so this random story about Picard on trial. Yep, this is it. Collateral Damage, October 2019. That's it. It's last book. It's just such a shame. I've said this before too, and I guess it's my final thing on Star Trek for now. Is I think one of the most under sort of reported stories is what happened to Star Wars was about to happen to Star Trek. Sadly, in the end, it seems like it happened to Star Trek anyway. But a long time ago, it was discovered that when Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams' production company, went over to Paramount, CBS, whatever, to pick up the Star Trek franchise, to do movies and stuff, part of what Abrams and Bad Robot wanted was a deal in which not only would they make new movies and get to franchise that and create related tie-in content and toys and stuff, but what they wanted was for anything old to be ended. Now, I think partially because of the nature of like the weird way in which Paramount and CBS sort of co-owned Star Trek, like they really weren't able to pull that off. And so, they made the movies, and there was like a limited, slightly unsuccessful comic tie-in run. There were some books, which interestingly only just recently got published, right? So there were books, like I think even by David Mack, some tie-in books to sort of the J.J. Abrams verse, right? That were just sort of shelved for years. It's like they just didn't really know what they wanted to do. And meanwhile, there was this golden era of like Star Trek set in the old, original sort of continuity continuing to go. A lot of interesting competition, and that was not JJ's vision. Paramount, CBS were not able to deliver. But think about this, right? Based on what we know, he wanted Star Trek to be. Disney buys Lucasfilm in 2012. They start looking around for what can we do to get back our $4 billion investment. Let's make some movies as fast as possible because we know people will show up for those. Who's around? Who do we want? Oh, Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams. People like what he did with Star Trek, right? Think about it. He probably came to them with the same deal. He said, "I'll make movies. We'll do, we'll franchise it. We'll be sort of the co-producers. There can be the books and the toys, whatever the hell. We don't care. But what we want is for there to be no competition from the old." And I think that this probably explains almost more than anything, I think the main sort of business impetus for why the E was decanonized. I just don't think that's discussed enough. So it's been very sad to see that Star Trek sort of seems to have gotten something of a bit of a reprieve for a while, as Bad Robot then went over to focus more on Lucasfilm. But I think in the end, sadly, the forces of our pop culture become increasingly focused on like TV shows and movies and stuff rather than things that like take some time to read and stuff like that. The people who like books are dinosaurs now, and they just, I don't know, they just don't create the kind of buzz that like a corporation can use to talk to their board about like how hot their franchise is, right? Whereas like these streaming apps and stuff allow like a lot of really great proxy metrics, right? Oh yeah, we sold some more iPhones and Happy Meal toys, and oh yeah, giveaways were like free sign up for Disney Plus. Great, that's all they care about right now. Anyway, I'm totally rambling. Let's see if there's any questions I've missed. BioWare, the Power of Grayskull. Speaking of Grayskull and He-Man, I'm a big He-Man fan actually, and there's some really exciting stuff happening in He-Man world too. I'm not talking about like there's apparently gonna be like a new Kevin Smith He-Man cartoon. I'm not super excited about that, but there's this really interesting revival in the old original He-Man stuff, and Dark Horse has been doing an amazing job of cataloging all of the old comic strips and short stories, and they've produced these brilliant hardcover reference guides to all the old toys, the TV shows, the characters. It's just really cool to see. Dark Horse seems to be flourishing again, and it would be interesting to see they'll give them that sort of treatment to the EU. Oh, Matt, good question. What's the weakest excuse you've heard so far for why someone didn't buy Heart of the Jedi? I said this earlier in the stream. I have to say, I'd say the lamest, most most risible sort of reason I've seen someone give is that they claimed that they read it years ago, right? I saw something. I don't know if you saw this. I saw someone. They said they go, wow, they're selling on eBay for hundreds of dollars. Oh man, yeah, boy, to think that my copy was sitting in the thrift store for years, right? They're lying their butts off about this stuff, right? It's just amazing. But I think the weakest excuse I've seen is just people just say they just thought it was going to be there later, And again, we were both begging everybody to not just buy one, but buy multiple copies, right? So next time something like this happens, I'm just going to open up a bank, the EU bank, and I will loan you the money. If it really comes down to someone waiting for payday, I will loan you the money. I will only ask for a major amount of interest points in return, But let's see here. I don't have it because I haven't bought it yet. I'm thinking about getting it because it looks pretty cool actually. It just physically looks like they've done a good job. I didn't realize it was hardcover until I saw someone sharing some photos. If I get it, I'll share them around. Oh man, it was great. It was great. It was a really funny prank you played. Yeah, great. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Indiana Jones has an EU that is like, as you probably know, I mean, there's like German versions too, like original German novels. There's original French novels, there's video games, there's so much there. And does it have the tightest continuity as the EU? Not much does, but no, but yeah, those pieces will get wiped. And it's sad because as much as I didn't like the fourth Indiana Jones movie, I remember there was some little Easter eggs there that sort of like took you back to like the old Indiana Jones Adventures TV show, Young Indiana Jones and stuff like that. There were those cool little Easter eggs, and they're gone. And I think the thing that I'm I'm also sad about is that they're going to do a sequel to Willow on Disney Plus, I think, or something I've heard. Not to trigger Matt, but there's a Willow expanded universe, right? And not even thinking of the Chris Claremont books, which are kind of weird, but there's games and there's RPGs and stuff that continue the original story, and no one working on that new show is gonna pay any attention to that, and that's untenable, I think. Yeah, and the thing about the Picard show is I gave Discovery a chance. I watched the first couple episodes, and I just realized that, particularly as a prequel, it just didn't make any sense. It didn't have the feel of Star Wars. It didn't seem to particularly tie in. Now, I appreciate the efforts of some hardcore Trek fans to sort of do some like intellectual judo to try and make sense of it all. Yeah, it just, to me, just doesn't have the feel. And I've said this before about elements of the Filoni Clone Wars. Even if you could make it fit, I don't want to open up a whole can of worms about the Clone Wars per se, but there are elements of it that even if you could make them fit sort of rationally, you could tease something. There are certain bits of it that don't have the feel of the old EU, like there's like a tonal thing, and the Discovery was just weird. And so I haven't really given Picard a chance, to the extent that I'm into Star Trek, because I like the books and stuff like that. What was so unfortunate is it's just like, yeah, they threw all of it out for a show that I think has, kind of divided the fandom. It's a real shame. Yeah, they're not the best. No, it's too bad. Not the best. I still think Voyage Home is probably my favorite. It's just, it's a funny one, and it's reminds me of California, where I grew up. And anyway, but Wrath of Khan is still really good, although it's just so sad. It's like, given everything we talked about, like what's happened with pop culture and everything, it's like everything's moving so fast and quick and so flashy. Wrath of Khan, which I think is so powerful, it just bores people now, which is really sad. So I hate to say it, and this is one of those things where it's like I hate when I'm accused of being some sort of like new canon critic or whatever. I'm not. I don't follow the new stuff. I don't know enough about it to critique it. I can make some observations structurally about what I pick up through osmosis and what I hear Lucasfilm, who I do pay attention to, sort of say about it, right? But when it comes to Abrams, yeah, listen, my thoughts are purely the empirical product of my experience consuming his content. I never got lost. I think his Mission Impossible movies were jump the shark. I think that I liked the first Star Trek movie. Actually, it was something fresh about it. It was visually interesting. It was a okay story, even though it just tortured the lore. Star Trek Into Darkness is just horrible, horrible. And it was weird too, the way that it was like it's been so long since I've seen it, but it was like, it wasn't clear who it was actually supposed to appeal to, right? It's like, it was a remake of Wrath of Khan, effectively, but this was all supposed to be like, but the whole point of the new JJ stuff was it was supposed to open up Star Trek to a new audience. So it's like, as a bad movie, the Wrath of Khan sort of like, the emotional beats aren't working for this new audience. And for the hardcore fans, we're just pissed off that he's screwing with that lore. It was like a movie made for nobody, a movie designed not to appeal to anybody. So what a shame. I've heard that he's going to be getting more involved in the DC movies, whatever. And it's like, for any DC movie fans, I'm sorry to hear that. I don't think it's going to go well. Let's see here. Yeah, well, I've got a couple extra copies too, and I mean, I think that there's a pretty interesting buzz right now, and I sort of feel like the real time to sell on eBay would have been like like the day that it got taken down. The prices seem like they're coming down a little bit, right? I mean, again, keep in mind there are thousands of copies out there now. Prior to this, there were like maybe 100, right? And none of those 100 were going to want to sell, But so there's definitely some opportunism out here. The prices have gone really high. They're starting to come down now. But I'm I've got my spare copies, and I'm just going to put them in a lockbox, and I'm going to wait like 10 years, right? For when a lot of the people who bought them just to be opportunistic have forgotten about them. They've gotten old and moldy. Mine are going to be pristine copies that are going to be, hopefully worth more someday. But it's interesting, by the way. This is this is not going to win me some fans, but I've seen a lot of anti-scalping rhetoric as a result of what's happened with Heart of the Jedi on eBay, and I'm like I'm like pro scalper, and I'll tell you why. Particularly, okay, on the one hand, the context of Heart of the Jedi, we begged people to buy it, right? So it's like if you didn't get it, right, like, well, your only chance is to buy it for $200, right? We begged you to buy it for 11. But there is this funny thing that happens with scalping where it's like, okay, there are people out there asking ridiculous prices for it. And I don't think they're all selling, right? But there definitely are some that have sold at a couple $100, right? And I think what's helpful about that is if you think of the long time horizon, right? Someone selling that book for 200 is going to bring more people out of the woodwork to sell their books too, right? Because someone's going to say, yeah, I was going to read it, or I was going to read it again, but shoot, if I can get $200 for it, let me put it on eBay too. They're not all going to sell at 200, right? At some point, the prices are going to have to sort of come down. At some point, the person's either going to put it back in the collection or sell it off again, right? So the prices that are time are going to come down, but it's taking the scalpers actually sort of like drawing people out of the closet, right, sort of into the marketplace to do it in the first place. So it's kind of controversial, but like sometimes scalping plays a very important role in making sure that people who want this stuff actually can eventually get it, right? Because, and it's a paradox, right? It's like I always say that about the Dig magazine. So from 1999, like the Lost City of Tatooine, it's this incredibly obscure piece of EU, which I've only seen like several copies. I have one, but I've only seen several copies available ever, right? Tons of people have it. It was a big children's archaeology magazine back in the day. Lots of people have it, in their basement or in their files or something, but it doesn't like sell enough to induce anyone to know anything about that. It's like worth taking the time to get it out of your files to put on eBay, right? So when it does occasionally sell for hundreds of dollars, I think it's a good thing because it's going to like actually make it worthwhile for someone to go track their copies down themselves and then make them available for the people who want them. People who like books of dinosaurs now. It's true. I'm one of them. I'm a dinosaur, so it's sad to say. It just feels like that's what the market's telling us. And it feels like that's a lot of the decisions being made about books and stuff like that. It just seems like that's just a reflection of that, fortunately. Let's see here. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember where I first heard that. I've talked about this a bit with Callum Johns on a stream, and I think this is going back years now. There's a channel called Midnight's Edge. I haven't watched them in a couple of years, but when they first got started, they were like very focused on the film industry, and because I think it was started by some filmmakers. And they did a really good investigation into, and I think this was like pre Last Jedi. So it was, I think that channel's gone kind of, they're kind of joined like the sort of the kind of the, it's changed. It was really interesting back in the day. They would do these like video essays where they would dive into like the business, and they didn't know anything about Star Wars. They didn't connect it to that, but they just really dove into the business dealings. So I would encourage anyone. This is maybe like 2015 or so, maybe 2016. Yeah, it's Midnight's Edge, J.J. Abrams deal or something. Like it's worth looking up. It's highly recommended. They're the ones that kind of got me thinking a bit about this. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that's probably the strongest when I think about it. I think I will do that. Yeah, that's a good idea. I did a video on it a while back, and I definitely got some comments to that effect. And I think I answered some of them there, but I think it would be worth its own getting its own attention. I think I would do it in publication order, as best I know how. I think that would be a fun innovation. Do, 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 do. Oh well, I think that wins that wins it. That wins the prize. That's probably the lamest thing. A lot of people just don't understand the nature of this. They just think it was something that was legit and that it's sort of been like sort of surprisingly taken down. It was a freak upload, and yeah, and it's no shock that it's gone and it's not getting the Kindle treatment. Although you could download a PDF and email it to your Kindle so you could have it on your reader, right? But it's not going to be official. And at the end of the day, too, and I think this will be my last bit. I just think that never forget, if you can't get a copy, it's always available for free. StarWarsTimeline.net. All right, adios.